everybody. It's good to see you here, and hopefully I can entertain you with some of my life adventures with UFOs and maybe aliens. Are they real? Sure are. I had a great many experiences during the 90s, and it was during the whole decade of the 90s. I'll just give you a bit of a rough idea where I'll be leading into this presentation. In the 90s, there was a worldwide UFO wave of activity, starting from about '89 in South Africa and then spread right throughout the world until about 1999. And it was a lot of disc activity, large boomerang-shaped craft, cylinder, motherships, all sorts of stuff was happening. And I was lucky enough to get a bit of video footage, but what I actually saw, if I'd have had video footage of that, it would just be mind-blowing, because sometimes some of these close encounters, it just stuns you. Even with a camera in your hand, you just don't think you're taking a photo, it just blows you out that much. But I'll explain some of those. And I put together a little video. It's about a 20-minute video, but I'll stop and start throughout the video, and I'll talk about various aspects of it, because I have video footage to show you along the way. And I found that's probably the best way I can do that without wasting time trying to find the right file type thing, you know. Okay, well, Cheryl and I have just recently put together a Facebook page called Strange Encounters Down Under, where we wanted to try and interview Australian people and record their personal stories about their unusual or strange events. Not a lot of this material is seen or known worldwide, and there's so many stories. Probably every one of you here have one of your own, and we can interview Glenys and get some of her amazing stories through her life together, and just so we can share it with people and they can see what sort of things they're experiencing. And some people are a bit afraid to come out publicly and talk about these things, because they think that some people think I'm crazy, but when you hear other people talk about their experience, it helps open them up, and they get relief and satisfaction from hearing other people's stories. So that's our intention. So that's Strange Encounters Down Under Facebook, so go and have a look at the stuff we get. I've got a lot of my video compilations up there with UFOs that I've filmed. In 1970, I was working in Sydney at Concord, right on the Parramatta River, and I worked late night shift, and I was just getting into the car, which is right on the banks of the river, and very dark at that point, no lights there. And I saw this object movement out of the corner of my eye, and just as I was getting in the car, a UFO object of this shape and colour was about from here to the window over there away from me, just at low altitude, just slowly moving like that. I just stood there and watched it, and I thought, there's somebody in that watching me. And it was just like this. It was about 3 metres long, about, say, 2 metres high. There was no markings on it, it was absolutely silent, just not far above the ground. And I just watched it go, and then it went across the Parramatta River and took off on the other side of it in the lights of North Ryde. So, what was that? So then I made some inquiries, and that's when I first contacted the Sydney UFO group, UFO, and first met people like Bill Chalker and Colin Morrison, some of the old timers that were there in those days, and I really got interested in this UFO phenomenon. And I interviewed a lot of people, had my own personal home phone number in the Sydney phone book for quite a while there, and everybody in Sydney that wanted to report UFOs during my number, so I was able to go and interview a lot of people and record it on reel-to-reel audio tape, and heard some amazing stories, and this subject was getting more and more fascinating for me. So I moved to Katoomba, right, when I went to Sydney, so I left all that Sydney rat race behind, but it wasn't too bad in them days, and bought a place up in Katoomba, and beautiful skies up there, you can imagine, at night. And got interested, still had the interest in UFOs, and one particular night, this was before video, this was with a 35mm camera using black and white film, 400 ISO fast black and white film. I used to process the film myself so that I could force process it, and any small illumination caught on film I could enlarge it up and see what I could do with it. So I started photo enhancement back in the 70s with film, and this particular strange light was just in the sky hovering, and it just didn't look right. It was a bit fuzzy, and so I snapped a photo of it and just thought, oh, I'll have a look at that later, you know. And it just sort of blinked out, and I thought, oh, that could have been something, and it turned out to be, this is what it was. So it's, whether that was a dome on top of that, I don't really know, but all I could see was the illumination there. But it's an interesting photo of something unusual. It was, I've estimated probably 15 to 20,000 feet altitude, so it wasn't very low and it wasn't extremely high. But I was able to get this photo of it. That was the first one. And then there was an orange light over the, this is all heading out towards the Burragering Valley to the south of Katoomba. And there was an orange object, which was very unusual. This was before the hoax devices started to happen, which is the garbage bag, the firelighter type thing under them, which happens in the 90s when they were first introduced. And same thing happened here. I got a couple of black and white photos of this, and there's a little, well, I call it a little nipple on the left-hand end of that. It was a little protrusion, and the object was actually moving to the right, so it had this sort of beam in the the direction it was heading, and a fuzzy corona around the whole object. And it's quite an unusual photo. And on the right-hand top, it sort of steps down a little, as if it had like a, you can imagine like a windscreen here, like where the observers were or something. It's just that the structure is not perfectly. It's not a saucer shaped perfectly. It's got some features in there. But this was only a very small object, some distance. And what I did, I had a negative, and I blew the negative up, and then I took a photo and enlarged that negative even again to get this full frame photo. So that's the sort of thing you could do with darkroom and 35mm film. These days, because film is much more high resolution than the digitised films we get today, like digital camera, and you get a lot of pixelation, but we didn't have that problem with 35mm. So that was, this particular photo was in one of the UFO Paranormal magazines. Rex Gilroy, who was a long time researcher, you've probably heard of Rex, most of you people probably have. He did a story on this and had the photo of this in the magazine with the details I gave him exactly at the time, so he's very accurate with this. I could tell you a story about that because we're interested in the paranormal as well. I had this dream where I walked into this newsagent with books everywhere, and I just went up and I picked up a book. And I didn't recall that dream until this particular day. I was in Lismore, went into a newsagent and had the whole, it was quite a big bookshop, a news agency with lots of books, and a big magazine rack up the centre of the floor. So I just walked up one side, never looked at any books, come down halfway down the other side and stopped, looked down at a magazine, and it was a magazine that had this story in it. Pretty weird. And that's when that dream came back to me. And I dreamt that months before. And it was pre-planned, obviously. But that was quite unusual. So I picked up that book, flicked through it, that was in it, and I thought, geez, what's the chances of that happening? It's pretty amazing, eh? Yeah. So this is the sort of things that throughout my life, I saw my first UFOs when I was about 11, but I didn't really know what they were, but I remember going to the library and getting Adamski's first book, Flying Saucers Have Landed, and that was 57 or so. But now I know during that period of time there was another worldwide wave of UFOs happening. That was a period of time when the discs were photographs over the White House in America. So it turns out that every 20 odd years you get the disc activity coming back again. That's my theory of the 20-year cycle. But that's just by the way anyway. So it appears to be like that. Now, in the decade of the 90s, this is where it was my first introduction to UFOs, but Cheryl being involved with the Brisbane UFO group started getting lots of reports in the early 90s, and I didn't pick up the activity because I'd sort of dropped out of the scene for a while, doing other things, and it wasn't until 1995 that I saw a formation just like this. This is a well-known photograph taken in 1951 in Lubbock, Texas, America. And some people say, oh, that's a flock of geese and all that sort of stuff, you know, but it's not, because it's they're UFO discs, and it's only the discs that form this formation. I know birds, when they're flying in migration, they fly in V formations, but that's another story. That's nature at work. The discs seem to, in this staggered, this is the characteristic of this, it's boomerang shape, definite boomerang shape, very wide V, which is boomerang shape. And there's about, I think there's around 19 discs in there without counting them now, but they're in the staggered formation. That's the interesting part about this. And I saw that, which at the time I saw it, was in the middle of a UFO flap. And flaps a great increase of UFOs, an influx in a short period of time, so they were coming around every 20 minutes, half an hour. But that was during the 90s. This was the only formation I saw of this type. I saw lots of other boomerang formations where the discs were sort of one behind the other, and the V formations of 5 to 7 objects that were locked in the position of that V formation. They seemed to be, when they were going north and south, directly up the east coast of Australia. And they seemed to be mainly in the ones in the fixed position in the formation were either 5 discs or 7 discs. And they range from size up to around 3 metres. And I'll tell you one that was very close to me, that had 7 discs in it, and I can explain the surface of I could see inside the object. So when I saw this, I thought, whoa, because I was laying down looking at the picture window, beautiful night, and I saw that. It was yellow disc, and the whole formation was surrounded by a fuzzy haze. They get the power they generate ionises the air around the formation of each disc. So the whole formation was like a fuzzy white haze around it. I jumped up, I knew exactly what it was because I remembered this photo. And that's when it started to happen for me. And all I had was a 35mm still camera. It had colour print film in it, 200 ASA sort of thing, or ISA. And I'm trying to snap these UFOs, mostly dimly illuminated, not too bright, with a 35mm camera at 30th of a second, because I was trying to stop motion blur, and it's almost impossible to do it. I didn't have a video at that time. 95 video cameras were just starting to become popular and affordable. So I went into, it was all starting to happen around me, you know. I could see over town a large object, looked like it had a conning tower on it, slowly going over the central business district of Grafton, where I was living at the time. And a big craft that was at rooftop height, was about the size of a football field. It was a big boomerang craft shape. I saw later when it went overhead, I could see the shape of it, and it was just at rooftop height, cruising up and down the east coast of Australia, because the lady in Sydney rang me up and described exactly the same thing there. A couple of the young girls in Coffs Harbour rang me and said they turned the TV off and the lights out in their unit, watching these things go up and down the beach, over the beach. That was their entertainment for the night. You know? They saw them. It was just cruising up and down the east coast. It was high activity. It's a wonder more people didn't see them.
Were they boomerangs or triangle?
Boomerang shape. Yeah, so after that, that's when I really got interested in it. So I put an article in the newspaper, and I've got copies of a couple of those there, and I'll continue. So I put an article, UFOs from other planets hovering around the valley. That's the journo's headline. But I told them what I'd seen, and I wanted to see if other people had seen these things. So I had the story there plus my phone number, I was inundated with phone calls from all over the district. People were seeing them everywhere. I'll just play a bit more. That's just some of the newspaper reports that I put in. That's how you create a bit of activity and get people contacting you to see what's happening. I'll just stop there. 200 UFOs in a fleet. Now that might seem a bit over the top, but in 1999, look, when this was all happening, I went out and skywatched just about every night because the job I had at the time allowed me to do that, you know. So I eventually got a video camera after going, while the flat part was on with UFOs happening everywhere. I went to Harvey Norman, all my mates, oh, the camera's broken, I've lent it to a friend, you know, I couldn't get one, so I went into Harvey Norman and said, you've got to lend me your camera. I can, you know, I've got to have the camera right now. Anyway, they said, oh no, we can't give it to you, so I made arrangements to buy one, but the night I got my own camera, the activity stopped. Or the UFO wave part of it, the flat part of it stopped. But I still got more, I got heaps more after that. But it was just strange how there was so much happening and I couldn't record it. 200 UFOs, I was looking towards the north, and the whole sky was lit up by this white fuzzy haze with all these bright single objects in this haze. And I estimated it with the shape and the density of the formation that was heading quite rapidly towards the east. I estimated 200 plus objects or discs in that formation, but the energy, the white haze around them was just enormous. And from that, I theorised that, because I'd seen discs with single, small groups, V formations, and that huge formation. Once it having the white fuzzy haze around it, the amount of energy being generated by that group must have been phenomenal. I likened it to 1.5 volt batteries. A little battery doesn't do much, but you line a couple of thousand of them up, you can motorise a boat or a car or just electricity multiplied. And I think that's what the UFOs are doing. When they're in a group, they can multiply their power so that each one benefits from that, and they use very little power to do what they want to do, you know what I mean? So after seeing that, I thought that's a feasible theory there. But 200 in a group is pretty amazing. And all up and down the East Coast, I was getting contacted by newspapers and people ringing me from all over the place. Then I did a first presentation in Lismore. That's when I first met Cheryl Gottrell and her husband Martin, and been friends ever since. And I had so much video footage, I put out a DVD and ended up doing 3 DVDs. Now, what are UFOs? UFOs come as many types of objects. They're not all alien spacecraft containing aliens. Very few of them are, actually. There's probes, and this is one what I call a probe. They're a small object, probably the size of, and very, very bright, like silver white, like highly illuminated. And they seem to have come in over the built-up areas, over the towns, and these were coming all over Australia now. In Melbourne, I had a lady ring me up and say, what's going on down here? There's that many satellites going on. I said, they're not satellites. They're probes. They're UFO probes for some reason. They send these little probes down and they do whatever they do. I've had them illuminate, brighten up, where you can feel it on your face, lighten up the ground around you, because I'm there amongst it all, you know. And this is what the probes do. They go over the build-up areas and they flare up very bright, and then they'll die back down and go a short distance and they'll just go right out, totally go out. So for some reason they flare up so they can probably illuminate the town area and get information from that town area, however they do it, and then they dim right down and they continue on. And you can tell they're very low because of the angle of approach, how close they are to you, and when you see them going through the trees, they're very, very low. They're much, much lower satellites, and this is one of them. brighten right up, really bright, mate, 3 or 4 times the brightness of Venus at its best. Some people call the police after seeing these things. And this one was just on dusk, directly right overhead. I don't know whether that was the same sort of thing or different, but it was very low altitude as well. Just, you know, right over town. People that want to see them could see them. They're not trying to hide or anything like that. It might be 2 or 3 a night sometimes. Now, hoax devices started to happen, which is a wheelie bin garbage bag, the black garbage bag that you put in the wheelie bin, quite a large one. And the idea is I retrieved one that fell in a person's backyard in Grafton, and they rang me up and said, this thing's just fallen in my backyard and it's still on fire. So I went and had a look at it, and it's a black garbage bag, and it was the opening of the bag is it's like wire, any sort of wire, and that's sort of taped up, and then there's another piece of wire underneath that's got a little depression in like that where they set a wax firelighter, a jiffy firelighter, and sometimes they tie a bit of tie wire about 2 metres or 6 foot long, and then tie another jiffy firelighter to that, and then they light it and send it up. It takes at least 2 people to do this, and then it just floats away and rises like a hot air balloon, and in the sky they look like an amber colour. That's the wax firelighter burning. And these were starting to happen all over Australia, and they spread worldwide because they've been videotaped in America, and they fooled me for a while what the heck they were, but I soon woke up to it because I studied it, and got some close-up video footage where I was able to analyse it and retrieve one where I was able to examine it. The wire was what I retrieved was an unusual wire that the electrician didn't know what it was. It was a craft wire type thing, and used in model aeroplanes, I think, to do the flaps of the aeroplane, the remote control part of it. And the craft shops in town had never seen it, never sold it, didn't know what it was. So whatever it was, the material was brought from out of town, assembled, and then let off in town. And I'll show you a graph here in a sec where, like Australia-wide, I was doing like how many UFOs, genuine UFOs, and then how many hoax garbage bags, and you'll see that they increase at the same rate, and then they decrease at the same rate. And it all happened so organised that the only thing that I could say, okay, there might be some school kids letting these things off, but generally there's an organised group doing it Australia-wide, and it's when the time of high UFO activity is happening, and when they're letting them off over built-up areas, town areas, and the UFOs will do diversions away from the town area because these things are floating around. So I think it's used as a diversionary type tactic. And some people say, oh, well, the UFOs are smart enough to know that they're just garbage bags. Maybe, but it seems to work because out of Central Australia, I think it was Alice Springs somewhere, local police pulled up this station wagon that was letting these things off, and the station wagon, back of the station wagon was full of all the materials to do it. And they were questioning, how come you're doing, what's all this about, you know? And they said, oh, we're diplomats. Showed them their ID. That's it, American diplomats. So they were testing them. So that's the whole system. I think the military must have been involved because they've got so many they can do. The communication for a start, you've got the manpower, you've got the reasons to do it, to keep UFOs away from where people are going to see the real stuff, let them see this stuff here, like the Phoenix light. That was, they weren't really UFOs, the bigger bit. But anyway, I digress a little. Anyway, I tried to film these I witnessed over 50 accounts of these hoax device launchings. Some of them were multiple. I've had video of 25, some like 25 of them off. Some of them had the wire and they look quite spectacular. I've got a bit of footage here, but what I'm showing you here on this one was a little bit different because normally the garbage bag had the fire lighter underneath, which acted like a hot air balloon, but this one, you can see as it gets low to the horizon, a bit of a break in the cloud, it was like a weather balloon, like the round balloon full of helium, and off that was whatever they were using to ignite the light. I think it might have been something other than a fire lighter. It was quite a bright light. And then when that went away, I left the camera rolling, and this low altitude, like brightly illuminated UFO came ripping over almost the top of me. I got video footage of it when it follows this hoax device. So this was pretty amazing, this book. This is the hoax device. You'll see it underneath, you'll see the wax dripping from it a bit. You'll see drips of burning wax drop from it, which is an indicator of the firelighter stuff. The wax, see the wax dripping off it? That indicates the... And then the light on top, there's a balloon that's suspending this the illuminated part, but the brightness of the flame is reflecting off the balloon at the right angle. This is probably a kilometre away at the time. And then it went over towards the horizon further. We're probably 2.5 kilometres away now. And you'll see above that little indication of a black object. That's the round balloon on top of that. It's fairly pixelised because this is only with analogue video, all this stuff. 2005. And this is what was following it. It was so bright, like blue-white bright. Only about 1,000 foot above my head. Doing about 600 kilometres an hour. I know, 300 kilometres an hour. And I had it was a bit, that was when it was almost like level with me. I zoomed in to get it, that's the closest point. And I had to turn around. It's a bit, all handheld camera, but it was a bit jerky because I had to turn around and film it again. Now to the point where it's going away from me. I'd love to know what it was. It seems to be a little bit flat on the right hand side, a little bit indicates a flat edge. No other reports of this particular thing at the time. It wasn't very late at night at all. But it flew probably 3 to 4 kilometres in the time I took the video then. That's it. It's gone. Now when I had this would be 95, 96, when all I had was a 35mm camera before I got the video. These were a group of 3 discs that were rooftop height right in town, only about 100 metres from where I was. I was standing up, my unit was on like the first floor, and on the deck that I was standing on didn't have a roof, and I could see over the roof of the house, of the units, these 3 objects just buzzing around town. So I snapped a photo of it at 30th of a second, and I had a diffraction grating filter, lens filter, over the camera to try and get the spectrum of the light, to try and, like a rainbow effect, to try and get the spectrum so I could get it analysed to see what temperature, what the light was made of, and do a bit of science on it. But the spectrum would have been much below these objects, and I was just more interested in getting objects because they were so close. So that's what changed the colour a bit, was the spectrum grating I had over it. And these little sparklies behind it, what they were doing were leaving a trail, an energy trail. And yeah, I don't know exactly. They looked like discs when I saw them, but they might have been, it's hard to say. But the yellowy part is like the energy around the disc. I was lucky to get anything actually, because they weren't there for long. These were just buzzing right over town, and then they turned around and took off. Trying to get close up, trying to find out what the shape of the object, and that's another one there, trying to get the shape of the object. The illumination was that bright, it's hard to get inside the light to see the actual shape. But very interesting effect with the colours because of the diffraction grating. There's not much you can really tell from that. It's just like it's the energy and the variation of the energy, and what they call that false colour enhancement. And those colours where they break up is the different intensities of the light. We'd had 3 days of rain. I thought, oh, probably won't be any UFOs around now. But I'll have a look anyway. It was fully overcast, the sky, and cloud base was probably somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 feet. And there was disk activity and V formations under the cloud, under the cloud base. You could see them. So I'm photographing these. Well, that's all I had to use, you know, like trying to capture something that I could show people and analyse. And at the time, I only saw that yellow square as actually the light that I could see. I could just see the light. But the blue in the background is actually the cloud. So against the cloud, you've got a bit of a silhouette of the actual object there, and that black bit here is the trail it's leaving. So it's leaving an energy trail as it's flying, and that's all showed up as a silhouette against the background cloud, which is probably lucky in a way that there was a cloudy night. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got that in a clear sky. So that's an interesting photo when you understand what's actually happening there. There's another couple of discs. There's the larger one in the front, and then another one following it behind it. And the blue is actually the cloud base. It's showing some energy. I think it is from. It's a bit of a strange one, this one, but the disc is much larger than the illumination I saw. I just saw the light, and I thought that was the actual object, but that was only part of a disc that was there, a larger one which you couldn't really see. So I had to get that really out of the emulsion of the negative. It was a bit of a task to even. When it was processed, I didn't just see that. It had to be searched for to see if I could find anything, and then dig into it, and then enhance it with special fractal software that was able to do super zooms without pixelation. Specialised software that I was able to get onto. In '96, I did a comparison with the genuine UFO with the hoax devices, and you can see that in the early couple of months there was around March, that was a flap, a high amount of UFOs over a short period of time, and so the UFOs were took off, and then suddenly, someone's realised we better let some of these hoax devices off, and then they started really, they were everywhere. And then as the year progressed, they diminished at a similar rate till December. It was all over. That was '96. So it was a good comparison of the real disk activity and the garbage bag activity, just to get an understanding of why they're letting all these things off and try and pinpoint who's doing it. But I think the theory that I mentioned earlier is the right one. So, okay, '97, we'll do that again. And this time it's peaked again in June. UFO flap, lots of UFOs, and a great increase of hoax devices as well. So somebody knew what was going on. As the activity increased, okay, we better let more of these things up. And that's how it happened. You know, like, not many people have got the knowledge of an increase of your activity over a certain area. You know? It's limited. You've got to have radar, you've got to have all that sort of stuff that only the military have done. That was a device I found that fell into the lady's backyard. It's the black garbage bag and the wire. That's how it was when it landed. It was just continued to burn, which is dangerous for property. If dead grass could burn people's property down, you know. So it's a silly thing to do. But this particular one was interesting because the lady got up she was up at 2 o'clock and having a cigarette out on the balcony, and she saw this thing come down and land in the yard. Next thing she knows is, here's this car pull up out the front, and then there's footsteps up a gravel driveway. And her husband is a truck driver, so she said he had heavy boots on, work boots on. She knows what they were because the husband's a truckie, you know. Anyway, she gets this bloke and she spots him and says, "What do you think you're doing?" He says, I'm trying to get through to that street back there." She said, "You're on private property, get going, you know." So anyway, he headed off. So with heavy boots, and he was casually dressed in a uniformy type greyish uniform, which all you could see at that time of the morning with not a lot of light on him. He wasn't coming home from like the Saturday night dance, that's for sure. No. So anyway, he turned around and you could hear the footsteps go, get in the car door slams and the car drives off. So he was coming to retrieve this. Him and his mate had been letting them off. 2 o'clock in the morning. Why? Trying to divert something around it. You don't do it just because it's fun to do it 2 o'clock in the morning, do you? That's what they look like. This is one of them actually that's approaching me. It had been across Grafton coming towards the north, so I videotaped it and got a fairly good look at it. I was able to see the shape of it, and I was able to do a bit of analysis on this just to have, so I could have comparisons to genuine UFOs to the hoax device, part of the research process. And that's what it was doing, it's just slowly floating along. And that was the double, there's 4 of those, and they had this 6-foot extension with another firelighter on them. But they were coming directly towards me and then got in another air current and then changed direction like that. And people say, "Oh, they did a 90-degree turn." Yeah, okay, the wind direction can do that too. Right. You know. So they just they'll drift in the breeze. Now this is an analysis comparison, side-by-side comparison of the hoax device and the illumination from it, and a real genuine UFO that came basically over the neighbour's backyard. I videotaped it and it was different. I knew it wasn't a hoax device because the whole thing was active, and it was a bronzy colour, but the light or the illumination coming from it was like, I call it a particle plasma, and you'll see it, because it was like needles of energy coming from this round object, and it was only the size of like 2 basketballs in volume probably, only about 40 foot away from me. And I started to shake because I thought, no, that's not a garbage, that's something different, you know, it's just there. So I compared that to one of these hoax devices. And you can see how it flickers, the flame jumps up and down inside the actual garbage bag. It's quite a spectacular looking thing, you know, like, and that one on the left was the one I was just explaining. That was I considered to be a genuine UFO. It looks like it's on fire, but whatever it is, it's got, like, the hoax device is using the hot air balloon principle to give it elevation, and the wind's blowing it. This thing had nothing like that, it was just on its own. The energy was so much energy coming from it, and it was bronzy colour. What it was, I don't know, but it was certainly unusual. So we're trying to find the shape of the object, or what's the source of the illumination. It shows it's a round object, and you can see the blue at the bottom is where the firelighter is. That's where the heat is generated. And it's just the different colours show you the different different amount of heat, and you've got the membrane. The garbage bag shows you that it's all contained in a membrane, which is the garbage bag. And the red on the bottom is the heat. Where this other one, it's just totally different. So that was a UFO, only 40 feet away from me. That was, we're in 1999 now. That fleet of the Marder of 200 discs I saw was in 1999. And when I saw them, I said, they're leaving, because we'd had, from my observations, was 95 and then 99, and I said, they're leaving, and they did. That was it. That was the end of the great amount of disc activity. I think worldwide, but I'm sure it was in Australia because I kept observing, and you'd see the odd V formation sometimes, or the odd formation of this, but nothing like during the 90s, and that was like the end of it. And I did see, I lay down on the back lawn one night with the binoculars because there was this strange light that was blink brightly, then a small one, then a blink again, small one. It was leaving space, so I looked at it with the binoculars and you could see that it was going away. It wasn't orbiting the Earth, it was going away, and it must have been going pretty fast because it was moving quite quickly at the distance it was. And it was going, leaving the solar system, I guess. All that sort of stuff is happening. The daytime ones, I don't know if any of you have had a look at YouTube and the Mexican daytime fleet footage, which are orbs, coloured orbs. Yeah, well this is what the daytime stuff seems to be, a lot of that type of material. And I consider them to be a space critter. They're not an alien spacecraft, they're a living entity. The object you see is the alien itself, the alien thing. And I think they come from outer space sometimes to either they give birth in our atmosphere, which they've been seen to do in Mexico. They disperse all these orbs, round orbs, out of the sausage type thing. And this particular day I had a 50-minute sighting of these things going over Grafton, and I videoed all that I could see. And there was some in clusters. They'd gather in clusters, and they'd be white, blue, pinky colour, and they'd carry black ones. You see some footage here of black ones that were always carried on top of the clusters as if they were important or dead. I'm not sure, but they carried the black ones as if they were very important. I'll show you that. These were probably, there was no cloud this particular day really. Oh, there was a bit, but they were about 3,000 feet altitude. They went that high. Went real high. Another one up the top right, a bit further away in the distance. They were all heading north this particular day, and then this was the first daytime wave event that I actually witnessed. So this bigger one is a cluster. There's probably 6, 7 or 8 of those orbs with black ones being carried on. This was with an analogue video, not by definition digital, what we have today. When it went in front of the cloud, this first one you could see it went dark in front of the cloud, so I was able to zoom up on that, and it looked like an upright cylinder going like that, like a 44-gallon drum, upright like that, going like that. And some of them were a blue, a spectrum blue, which looked beautiful against the blue sky. It was just like a really rich spectrum blue. And some were orange, some of the single one orange, like a rusty browny orange, and some were silver white, like very, very reflective. But, I don't know what they are, it's hard to tell what they are. You see the black one? It's being carried, and they roll around, and the big one, white one at the top seemed to be the boss one, as if they're keeping all the others. You see when you look at it and you study it and say, what's going on here, you know? So the big white ones seem to be keeping the others all grouped together, and while they're carrying this black one. Jellyfish UFO. Very few, at the time there was very few people in the world that had videotaped these things. What they are, the round orb again, and they seem to have a dangling appendage hanging down, which is like a gossamer tail, and it moves. You see in the video, sometimes it moves like in that action, then it'll change and move in that action, as if it's trying to assist the propulsion of the object in our atmosphere. And this particular one was the first one. I videotaped it for 8 minutes, right over the central of Grafton. And it seemed to, when it got, first of all it took a dive and then it increased, it was playing around a bit. And then it got into a steady movement. As it was heading north, it got serious of where it was going to go. And it was swishing its tail, and it was like a swinging the breaststroke type movement. As it swished its tail, it got a bit more propulsion. It was sort of like that. It was interesting. And that black part was down the lower part here. It was like a black eye. And it was on the leading edge of the thing. I don't know whether it was an eye or not, but that's what it could have been. That's what it looked like. And I'd seen a few of them at this stage, some at various altitudes. And there was a daytime event of these orbs, and they were going north. Let's just say I think it was the 8th or something like that, one of them. I've seen a few now, but one was, say, like on the 8th, and it went away. And then on the 16th, 8 days later, because I'd noticed that they returned 8 days, there was another event coming the other way. So they went up one day, and then 8 days later they come back. So I don't know where they went. It'd be interesting to know how far they went. But anyway, I had that in mind, and it might not be this incident because of the date, but it's the same type of object. And I thought, oh, it's the same time where I saw that other object 8 days ago, and I wonder if they're coming back. So I got my video camera and walked out the back door, and boom, there it was, heading over towards my back door. This was a close one, and people say, oh, it's a balloon, but it's not a balloon. The video, analog video, doesn't capture the real colour of this, or the sharpness that high definition digital does. And I went down to Port Macquarie. Those things I know, I think they remember. Went down to Port Macquarie, I was behind in the shade of a big tree there, and I saw one of these. I thought, God, there's one here. Anyway, it was going away. When I saw it, I stood out to have a look at it, and then next thing you know, it's come back around this other side of it, over here, so I could have a look at it from behind the tree, as if to say, I'm going to have a look at you behind the tree. And I'm watching it, got a bit of video on my digital camera, and suddenly it just took off, gained altitude. I think probably people on the beach might have seen it, made a bit of a fuss, and it took off. But it was the same thing in Port Macquarie, came around, was going away, came around, other side of the tree so I could get a look at me there, so they might have a memory. And this other one that came back and had a look at me 8 days later, as if I've had an interaction with more than just that with them. Another daytime, sometimes these waves, if you see a UFO in the daytime in particular, keep watching, because they can go all day. You might see one for 20 minutes, you might see another one in 5 minutes, there's another one right behind you. They just keep coming. So I stabilise them, and they've got black ones attached to this, probably 3 orbs with the black ones attached to it. And they roll around, and they can dip down, and they just go on their way doing whatever they are. But these are totally different to the ones that were happening during the disk activity of the 90s. So, but these I consider them all to be space critters, similar to what the astronauts videotape around the space station, and they see them out there. They come into our atmosphere, and we see them as these things. This one was, if you know what, if you've ever seen diesel spilt on water, you have that browny, rainbowy sort of effect. This one, the surface of this one was like that. Very unusual. And it had motion blur. I've stabilised this one, but the motion blur, the object itself wasn't leaving a trail, but the brown stain of the body was. It's like the light, a shift of the red spectrum from the object. It was unusual. It needs someone that's in physics and like to work that one out. But yeah, it's just a matter of being observant. The more you sky watch, the more likely you are to see something, and when you do, keep looking, because there's always more around. And and you never know what you're going to see. If you see them in the daytime, there's probably some around in the night time as well. So I wrote a book, and I'll tell you about it later. Now this one, there was a wave of daytime activity, and they're all moving like to the east of town, and they're all sort of going to the south. And then I spot this one here. It's done a turn. It's coming directly over the top of me to have a look at me. And it took a minute. I spotted it up at about that angle there. It's about, it might have been about 1,200 foot high, I suppose. Anyway, it took a minute to go from there. So when I lost it, I was right up against the house, and the eave of the house, I lost it from that. And when I stepped out to have a look at it, I couldn't find it anywhere. I don't know where it went. It just went. And this is what it was. It looked like a disc on edge. And note the colour, which is similar to that previous one, which is the orangey, reddy pink colour that shows up this colour on video. Because red is a difficult colour for video, especially the old analog video, to actually capture the red. But that's what it looked like, and it's like the membrane. Say put your hand inside a balloon and you wind your finger around the membrane of the balloon. That's what it looked like. There was something happening on the bottom of it like that. It looked like an internal movement as it was coming over. Very unusual. It looked like it's like a disc on its edge. Whether there was somebody in that, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It wasn't very big. It was only probably, it's probably, 30 centimetres, I suppose, in size. That'd be all it was. It wasn't very big. It certainly was strange. Yeah, this is the one that came back 8 days later. It's interesting to keep that in mind too. If you do see anything, so remember 8 days. You might have missed. You might have only seen the first event and get another one in 8 days if it's the same out here. But it was like that on the coast. All sorts of objects were happening. I had software that would stabilise it, which made it a lot better because a handheld camera was the best way to capture things because you don't know how much time you have to actually video them. Had the camera on in manual focus infinity, and you're able to get what you can. Now this, going back to the paranormal side of things again, I had this dream. Dream. No, it wasn't a dream, this one. It was, I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and bedroom window is about like from that distance there, and I'm in bed here, and between bedroom, I might be a bit further, where that vase is, there was an object in my room, in the bedroom, inside the house, and it was going like that. Just sitting there, just moving like that. I am awake, like, that's a bit weird, I've never seen anything do that. I'm not freaked out or anything. I'm just saying that's a strange way to move. That's going through my head, I am awake, and that's it. I watched it for about 20 seconds, I suppose, and then it just disappeared. 2 weeks later, I videoed this during the daytime, doing the same movement. This is the object, but then when I get the second look at it after it's gone behind a tree and come back out, it starts this wobble effect. This was probably only 150 metres away. Not that big. Seems to be 3 or 4. Now I've got it again. It starts doing this wobble. It's not a bird because birds don't flap their wings like that. They how a bird flaps its wings. This one's wobbling like that. It seems to be tucking one side under again. It looked like it was going to crash. I thought it was going to crash. It was that low. You can see by the tree it's not very high there. if it had it been high definition digital video, it would have got a clearer image of that, but they weren't really available at that stage. But that was just one strange object amongst a whole bunch of others. And these things can go all day. Seems to tuck a wing, like whatever it is, tuck something under, just scooping something in. Those white things are bright, silver, bright white. And the burgundy crimson colour seems to be popular with these types of objects. And this one here has was a bit bigger than some of the others. And this is the one that drops something out and seems to go back in again. And you'll see once it's stabilised a bit. See it coming out a bit, growing a bit at the bottom. Yeah. Sort of like laying an egg almost. You know, but it doesn't do it fully. It goes back up again. So what that is, I don't know. That's what makes them UFOs, I suppose. But not all UFOs are alien spacecraft. That's what all this stuff's about. Mm-hmm. This is just bright illumination using software, forthcoming enhancing, trying to see what the source of the illumination is. That's a close-up of or an enlargement of the orbs, the clusters. Here's another one with a triangle-shaped cluster with two black orbs on the top. See that? That's the V formation of the disc. That's 7 discs in that, and some had 5. They had one either less on either side. There were many of those going north and south, and I'd watch them that go, say, to the north, and another one would overtake it, and they were just amazing, you know. But one of these, a formation like that, went over my head about 4-storey building height, which is about 40 foot, and took up the width of 2.5 house blocks. I had a video camera in my hand, and I just said, you know what I said? And I said to myself, I started counting when I first saw them. I said, I could get abducted here, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. I'm starting to count, so before there was time, where the heck am I, you know. And so I thought, no, I'm not going to, don't video. I got a message in my head, don't video, but observe to get all the details you can. So I got the video camera and I'm just observing. Now, these discs were almost like a translucent, so you could almost see through them, you could see into them. It's like you could put your hand in there and not touch anything solid. And the surface of the disc, the whole disc was yellow, a colour, and the surface was, you know how you draw lightning, the lightning, that looked like white lightning. It was white, like silver white bright lightning streaks, like down that way on each disc. And then at the front of each disc there was a grey, bluey grey, khaki sort of colour at the front, and I thought that could be the brains of the thing, you know. It looks, because I think these things, they were the entity. The alien entity was each disc. They weren't discs with somebody in them, I don't think. There could have been, but they're only 3 metres. But I had the feeling that they were the living entity, the living alien. Each one of these was a living thing. And that browny part, the khaki sort of bluey grey part at the front was the actual brains of the thing. This is just my interpretation from observation. And each disc was surrounded by a white haze again, and the white haze of one disc was sort of overlapped the haze of the disc in front of it. And they went probably 60, 70 kilometres an hour. I was able to get a good look at this. And then I lost sight of it behind. The strange thing is I normally used to stand over here, like in the backyard where I could get a good view around everywhere, but when I saw this, I was standing at the back of the house, which cuts my view down. So I'm thinking, how the hell did I get from there to here? Because I never stand here. You know, that's another story. But then I stood out into the driveway and I turned the video camera on and I just missed them. But when I actually first saw these, I thought, are they individual lights attached to a solid object, or are they individual objects? I couldn't really tell because there was no outline that I could make out. But when it went away, and I could see there was at an angle like that, and I could see the top, and it was the same. So that showed me that they were individual objects. Anyway, they started to increase speed and increase altitude as they passed over town and headed north, and away they went. And I had other guys ring me up and describe these, the 5 discs in it, the 7 discs in it. I saw one with 7 discs overtake an aircraft that would have been landing at probably Coolangatta Airport, I suppose, from there. And I swear they would have seen it, because at that similar height and overtook the aircraft. Yeah, but they were all around, and I was lucky enough to get a really close look at them. And the next morning, I went to have a shave, and I was all like sunburned up around the top of the head face here. So I don't know, I'm thinking maybe from these things here, they were that close. Pardon?
Because they can get burnt.
Yeah, well, I hadn't, that seemed strange, but that's what happened. Yeah, but that was a very interesting period of time. That's what they look like. Now, this one I repeat a few times because they were at high altitude. I saw quite a few of them at high altitude, but they were very dimly illuminated. It was the movement that you'd see up against the black sky, the night sky. The movement would grab your attention, but they weren't like bright enough where you could get a real good video of them. So this is about the best I could get with a large boomerang formation at altitude. And it happens, so if you keep your eye, say from the centre to out here, what happens, I moved the camera faster than they were actually moving because I didn't estimate their speed correctly, I just had a couple of seconds to do it. But you'll see them move from the centre out this way, very, very dimly illuminated. You might pick it up, hopefully. That's stars now. It'll repeat a few times in a sec. There, you see? You watch. There's about three or four of them like that. It'll play again now, see? Okay. That's very good. There again. There again. It's very hard to see it. If you're right there, it is. See it? If your eyes pick it up, there it is again. There it is again. You can, if you half squint your eyes, you might see it. Anybody see it? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, I was playing around, when I was with Glenn Innes, I was playing around with a laser one night. Well, I wasn't playing around, I'm serious with those things, but I'm very careful never to shine it on an aircraft or anything like that. I've got to use it responsibly, like everybody should. And there was this, like a probe type light that I showed you earlier, heading towards the north, and I thought, that's it, I know what that is. So I went, 3 quick flashes, and then 6 to 8 seconds later, one of these flew over my backyard, the treetop backyard. But
do you reckon it was cloaked?
No, it was narrower than that, and it didn't have the tail like that. And I only saw the underneath of it, which had patterns, texture. But it was like only 6 to 8 seconds, and I thought, holy mackerel, if that's that thing there I just flashed at, got here in a hurry, because it would have been 10 mile away. They probably thought I was going to shoot it down, because the Yanks are playing around with laser technology now that can bring them down.
That's right, yeah.
So it was narrower than that, but it was that shape. That was the closest thing I can get to anything that's like it. And it came out of my backyard, which is probably 25 feet away, and it was only about 18, 20 feet above the ground.
How big was it? How big was it?
About 3 metres long.
Probably
3 metres long, yeah, but I reckon there'd be aliens in that one.
And then with the scout ship.
Yeah, scout ship.
Yeah.
And that one, yeah. If that wasn't that one, I flashed the laser out. It's got out damn quick. Where was he sitting around waiting, you know? Like, where did he come from? And was I threatened? Did I have a weapon pointed at me just in case he needed it? You think I'm going to laser and shoot him down? You know, was I a threat there? That's pretty serious stuff, you know, when you think about it. So, anyway, there it was, and I had a few experiences while I was there, I can tell you. I started with the little red pointer lasers, and when I was in Grafton, I'd see black object, black sky, or night sky just rip past. So what I'd do, I'd get the laser and just flick it in the flight path, just quickly. And then the object would go that way, so I'd in that flight path. And I think they realised that, hey, this bloke can see us, you know. So they come down and they started buzzing around over the house next door and that started buzzing me, basically. But anyway, I hit it with a red laser once and I've got a red spot in the sky. So it went over the roof, and then I put the laser on where it went, but the red spot was in the sky, so it went over and come back again, and I hit it with a laser. You know. I think you see the guys on YouTube, they'll get them and they'll turn them on and they'll use them like a torch. They won't react to that because that's human activity. That's just normal human activity. But if you start to real quick, or you can track, if you can train your eyes to see these things in the movement in the dark and just follow them like that quickly. Yeah, well, you can sort of make them aware that you're aware of them, and if you can follow them around in the sky and the path that they're going, then they know that you're. You ever seen one of those? Eh? Only in books. I saw one in real life. At the time that I was doing all this laser business, and I was up to all hours of the morning, late nights, early mornings when I was writing my book, and I'd go out smoking at the time. I'd go out and have a cigarette out in the backyard, or just out the back of the house there, and these things were going around everywhere. And it was a time when you could walk out and the air's around you's electrified. You know, there's something happening, and all the dogs in the neighbourhood are barking. You know, you look every direction, all the dogs are barking. You say there's activity happening here. There's some power in the air tonight. Anyway, this thing came over. I had an in-ground 25-foot swimming pool, and this thing came in low, not illuminated at all, between the trees and over the pool, at the end of the pool, which is only 20 foot away from me. And I saw the scales on the back end of it from the ambient light, the natural street light, whatever. And then I'm following my eyes up towards the front of it to try and look for the eyes and the face or something. And it must have realised that I could see it, and it started to wobble like this. First of all, it stopped, didn't move. And then I'm looking up towards the front of it, and it realised, I assume it realised I could see it. So it got in a wobble, which I think it might have thought, oh, it can see me, what am I going to do, type thing. And then it just disappeared in front of my eyes. And I just have no perception of it taking off in any direction. I think it just switched into like a squid octopus can instantly change into its environment, you know? I think
you reckon it shapeshifted?
Well, no, it just went into it changed. It just changed into its environment. And that's what I reckon it did.
How big was it?
It was about, each arm of the thing was about a metre. Oh, a bit under a metre, And I call these gargoyles, because during the 90s I had boomerang-shaped objects buzzing me. And they were various sizes. Some of them were like the size of the width of a house, more or less. And some of them were the size of this thing, and various sizes. And they would come down, and it was almost as if, geez, did I see that or not, type thing. They were that fast. And one come over the top of the house next door, and it had, and I thought it was going to hit me. And I got a huge adrenaline rush. And it had individual white lights along the front of it, like little LED lights along the front of it. And another one I saw had like patches of ochre on it, you know, like that was partly, it just had texture. and all sorts of stuff like that. And I called them, I didn't have a name, I never heard of anybody talking about them, and so I just called them gargoyles, because they're a bit creepy because they are black and they're like guardians of the night type thing, you know. So I call this thing a gargoyle, you know. Like, what it really is, I don't know, but I think it's probably a prehistoric sort of living creature that lives in the shadow of the earth. That's what I conclude with that, you know, because there was all sorts of stuff happening that I'd never heard of before. There were these and what I call interceptors, about the size of a football, and not quite exactly like that, but somehow like that. They had little wings, but the wings didn't flap, but they were only about the size of a football. Anyway, I was seeing these during the 90s, and then I'd, you know, like a meteor, you see a meteor, you see a streak of light. With a meteor, you can see it burn up, break up, sometimes it leaves a vapour trail of debris as it dissipates in the atmosphere. And these things never left vapour trails. And some, oh, that's an unusual meteor, you know. I just take notice, but didn't really adapt it to anything UFO, of course. And then this particular time when I saw this, I'd moved from downtown up into the hill of South Grafton there, which I had a bit better view. And I'd see these streaks go through the sky, and then another one would come in as if to intercept it. And I thought, geez, that's strange. They didn't, because that was only like a matter of a few thousand feet altitude. And I thought, that's unusual. Just see if that happens again, you know. So I'd see one streak, and then another one would streak in as if to intercept it. I thought, oh, there could be something happening here. And then it happened several times, you know. And I thought, that's really something. And then I started issuing the laser again. And these are the things that were flying sort of like over my house. And one particular time, I saw out of my peripheral vision on the right-hand side the movement of this black object coming, and it was going that fast. I couldn't lay my eyes on it when it was in front of me, but I saw it go in my peripheral vision of the left-hand side. And the time it took from the distance, I estimate a 50th of a second to do that. That thing travelled at rooftop height at 300 kilometres an hour, and I could hear that as it went through the air. And it was one of these things. So they were coming around buzzing me as well. And yeah, like over the clothesline, just everywhere. And I had cameras set up, and I want to be able to videotape these things and photograph them so I can show people, you know, like these things, I haven't heard of these things before. So I had camera up there, camera up here, camera in my hand. I had a bike helmet on with a night vision infrared camera on the top of that, recording on the inside, and I'm all set. Right, camera's primed, everything, so this particular night they were happening and I'm ready to go. And next thing you know, there's this big black shadow the size of a car just goes right over the rooftop of the house and goes, God, look at that. Oh, the cameras, you know, didn't show up on any of the cameras, so I wasn't able to videotape anything, very elusive. But these ones are called interceptors because they're coming in and another one comes in as if to intercept. Sometimes they'd be very, very bright and they'd lose it, they'd flick. They were that fast, they'd just flick on but leave a streak in the sky. So there was another thing that was buzzing around. You know, you get the feeling when you're outside in the dark, someone's watching me, you know. Oh, as if it's a bit creepy, you know. Someone's watching me and you look around. Can't see any light. Uh-oh. That thing was above me. And it was only probably no more than 10 foot above me. I could see the shape of it. I could see that black streak down the centre of it. I looked up, saw it, and it disappeared. So that was just there, just overhead. I had a few very close ones like that. Now, when you're involved in ufology and there's more than just like objects in the sky. You hear of alien abductions and close encounters and contactee events and all sorts of stuff. It goes into the paranormal as well. It's all associated in some way or form. And this particular time, this lady rang me up and she says, I got these strange marks like alien prints. And I've also got a scratch on my arm, like a cross. And I said, well, I better come and have a look at this. You know, so I went and had a look. Sure enough, she had like a cross scratched on her arm. The sun had been fighting aliens in his bedroom. He swears he's been fighting aliens in his bedroom. And wake up all this morning with scratches all over him, bleeding with scratches on him. Been fighting aliens at night. All sorts of strange things were happening to him. Anyway, I look at this in the bedroom, and sure enough, there's strange, unusual prints on the bedroom mirror. So I contacted the Monash University in Melbourne, a friend down there that's into UFOs, and I said I need a DNA test immediately, you know, like as soon as possible. Because I'd never done any of this before, but I knew I had to get those prints off because the lady wanted to clean the mirror. She wanted to get rid of everything. So I got the kit, I got the instructions how to do it, everything I needed. So I got the hair protector on, I got the rubber gloves, I got the mask, I got everything I need doing swabs off the mirror. And I videoed the whole thing so that I could send all that down when it was analysed. So it was all done to try and identify these prints. And that's what one of them looked like. They're very broad, narrow fingers. It's only 4. That's just one print. There's another set, another couple. They look like human hands or animal prints. I dusted them with fingerprint dusting and removed them. I was explained how to lift them off the mirror and put them behind glass and preserve them. You know, so they're still around. I don't have them anymore. I put this up on the internet. This is going back in 2000. At that time I had 4 megabytes, a whole 4 megabytes of disk space. So the administrator rang me up and says, he said, you're going to have to pay commercial rates on this site of yours. I said, why is that? He said, well, you've had over 100,000 hits here today and it's only Saturday, you know, like, you know, like you're blocking our system up, you know, with this story. So I said, have you read it? He said, yeah. I said, well, it's fascinating, isn't it? He said, it was, yeah. I said, okay, well, I'll pull the story if you don't charge me anymore. So it was a free site, you know. He said, yeah, okay. So I pulled it down. But there was a worldwide interest in it, like 100,000 hits on a Saturday morning. That's not bad, a story like that. But the DNA, what happened, they had a dog that used to run around in the house, and one of the flake of skin actually attached to one of the fingerprints. And that showed up as canine DNA.
Canine?
No, that was only the flake of skin that attached. The prints didn't show any DNA whatsoever. It was only the flake of skin of the dog that showed up the canine DNA. Yeah, but the prints themselves, no. Well, that's what they told me. They would have told me, I'm sure, if there was something there, but DNA apparently can't be taken off fingerprints, so. But it was worth a try, you know.